Hey everybody, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player that has his character get a bit too close to his dog, a story about a bard player doing what you would expect, and more. But first, here's a kitty to help get our wholesome levels up before we bring them right back down. There we go, and now I think we are ready to dive right into these stories. The Puppy Master by Reddit user Particular Address 17. I felt the need to post this, mostly just to get it out. We had a character join our established group to make the numbers up when our rogue had to leave due to having a new baby, and it all went really sideways. The cast. DM, our regular DM, has been running our game for a couple of years. Cleric, Rogue's husband, who is a friend of DM, mostly focuses on a support role. Fighter, longtime friend of mine and the DM's, likes to play as a frontline warrior, keeping enemies away from us. Wizard, this is me, standard supporty wizard. And Ranger, the new guy. Found him online and DM vetted him before adding him to the party. Likes to play, well, you'll see. The first few sessions with the new guy went fine. He was playing a Beastmaster Ranger with a large dog as a companion. The dog would run forward and aid our fighter, while he stayed back with me and shot arrows. He always made a fuss of the dog after any encounter, and really made it feel like a character. It was cute. On our fourth session with him, the cleric returned. He had not been able to come due to being a new dad for a while. He gives us an update on Rogue and says that once she feels ready, they'll be taking turns playing as his cleric, so they both get to play and parent. Everyone is cool with that, and they're both great. This is the session where Ranger starts to get weird. It's a less combat-heavy session than the previous few, and a large amount of it is spent at an inn, planning our next move in the campaign, while sat around the table. Cleric is explaining what he's learned from his order while he was away, and filling us in on some plot details that the DM had given him, the in-game reason for his absence. And Ranger seems to be listening intently. He then scribbles something down and slips a note to the DM. The DM looks a little confused and says, "Dog rubs his head against your hand." Ranger interrupts. "It's her. Dog is a bitch." The DM nods, and Cleric continues. Ranger points something out on the map, but tells us all that he wipes his hand on his jerkin before touching the map so it doesn't get sticky. What the fuck? The DM sighs, but Ranger's insight is useful, and we continue. A little while later, while I'm talking about something magical, Ranger passes another note to the DM, who says, "I guess you can. Dog seems to like it," and wags her tail. The questioning tone in the DM's voice had me curious, and I ask if I notice what's going on. DM has me roll perception and tells me, "Ranger has his hand under the table. You can see his arm moving, and you softly hear dog making some sort of sound." He'd better just be petting the dog. I decided not to pry any further and got back to the game, asking Fighter what they made of my plan. Ranger interrupts at this point. His contribution is good, the roleplay is good, but he starts it with, "I wipe my hands on my jerkin before picking up the condiments and spoons and using them as props to explain." Oh god, he's not petting the dog. Why hasn't the DM put a stop to this yet? At this point, it's a little off-putting, and I don't know why he keeps drawing attention to it. That session ends, and afterwards, I talk to Fighter and Cleric about it and ask if they thought it was weird. They of course said yes, and Fighter said that they thought Ranger was a dog lover in more ways than one. Wink wink, nudge nudge. And Cleric said that he hoped that Ranger would just pack it in. In the following session, we are engaging in the plan that we decided on last time. There's a lot of stealthy creeping around, and at one point, Ranger and Dog, being our scouts, move ahead alone. When they return, after a short 10-minute private roleplay session with the DM, we are told both Ranger and Dog return dirty, marked with grass stains, but looking satisfied. I catch Fighter's eye, and they make a sickened face, but the game continues. The Ranger informs us that after forcing his way through a tight passage where he really had to squeeze, he had managed to find an entrance to the castle. It's not far, and he leads us off in that direction, and the rest of the session proceeds as planned. I receive a message from Fighter not long after the session that just says, "Why is he role-playing effing his dog?" To which I just replied, "He better stop, or I'm going to have a word with the DM. This isn't what we signed up for." The following session rolls around, and we start the session coming out of a long rest. Ranger is an elf and has been downstairs in the common room all night with Dog because he doesn't sleep and doesn't need a bed. This is the first session with Rogue back, playing Cleric's character, and as Cleric enters the room, DM says, "Ranger is sat at the table, looking kind of blissed out with his eyes unfocused. Dog is nowhere to be seen." Ranger then passes DM a note, and at this point, I'm on high alert for some really weird dog-related crap. And sure enough, Dog dashes out from under the table, muzzle wet with something, which causes Ranger to snap back into the room and see Cleric standing there, just as Dog jumps up and licks her face. Ranger then says, "She likes you. Don't worry, she's real affectionate when you get to know her," and winks. At this point, I had had enough, but I kept my mouth shut and made it through the rest of that session. Rogue was not impressed, and even less so afterwards, when we told her what had been going on. She was grossed out, and joined the rest of us in asking the DM to boot Ranger from the group. He was disinvited, and we didn't have to see his dog-loving face again. Dude, why the hell did the DM even allow that? Normally, I would say that Ranger was just a troll trying to mess with this group, but as OP stated, he was actually helpful as a player when it came to everything else. So that just tells me that Ranger was using D&D as a way to play out some sick fantasy. The moment that Ranger passed the DM that note, he should have been told a flat-out no, or just booted right there. God, that makes me cringe. I think we need some more kitties after that one. Oh, there we go. That is just a bit better. And I think we can't move on to the next story fast enough. So let's hop to it. The Fish Hook by Reddit user Lighthearter. Was recently finishing DMing a Curse of Strahd campaign for some friends. Only one person is important for the story, the Paladin. He was playing a halfling fisherman, heavily based on Tolkien hobbits, so very laid back, food focused, etc. As a player, he was something of a min-maxer, and a bit metagamey, but nothing game-breaking. A custom edition I put at the end of the game had the party receive gifts for essentially restoring a set of lost gods. I decided that everyone would get an epic boon and a magic item geared to their character. For Paladin, I saw the Hook of Fisher's Delight and knew right away it would be perfect. So we got a great scene of this restored god thanking the little halfling by giving him a magical fishhook. I got a message the next day that Paladin had looked up the hook and decided that it was a completely worthless item. He told me he wanted to retcon his character accepting it because it was totally in character for a paladin to decline the gift, and that way I won't have to waste space on my character sheet writing it down. I was crushed. I would have let him have an alternative item if he'd look it up and thought I'd given stronger ones to the other players, but he said he'd rather have nothing than have the item that I specifically picked out for him. So I just said, okay. We finished out the campaign, with me kinda going through the motions with his character, and I declined to run another game afterwards. Objectively, it wasn't the worst thing that happened, or the worst thing Paladin did, even in that very campaign, let alone overall with the group. But it felt so gosh dang personal when he could have just said nothing, not recorded the item, and gotten literally the same result. Or just led with, "I think this item's not as useful as what other players got. Do you think we might talk about a replacement?" TLDR. Gave a custom magic item perfectly suited for a character's backstory and roleplay, and he went out of his way to message me after that it was a waste of space to write it down on his character sheet. Wow, what a dick. It's one thing to get an item and not really like it. It's a whole other thing to tell the DM that it's worthless and would just waste space on his character sheet. Like OP said, he could have just talked to him, tell him that he didn't like the item, and maybe ask for a replacement, instead of being passive-aggressive about it. Hopefully, this didn't sour OP's taste for DMing for good. Let's move on. It's the Bard. It's always the Bard. By Reddit user Wolfie27. So, I'm DMing a homebrew campaign for my friends that we just started Session 0 for, or the prologue as I like to call it, and are still technically in the prologue, but I'm not going to hold that against my players for wanting to explore. They're having fun in the prologue, and I'm not going to force them to move quickly through it if they don't want to. But this post isn't about that. It's about the Bard. For slight context, the party is made up of a multi-class Tiefling Monk Sorcerer, a Tiefling Rogue, and an Eldrin Elf Bard, all of which are level 5. I helped the Monk Sorcerer and the Rogue with their characters, because they asked, but the Bard insisted that he did not need my help, even though he's never played D&D before. But he was using D&D Beyond to make his character, so I didn't worry about it. Fast forward to them getting off the ship and into the land that they have never been to before, and then seeing what I called a caravan because I did not have a better word for it at the time, which were essentially transport wagon type things that will take them further inland to a small town that has a total of 10 people living there, an inn, and one shop. They pay for passage, and the Bard has no interest in the people of the caravan until the Rogue asks about them and finds out that all of the people are all very happily married, with either a husband or a wife and children. The Bard then asks if he can roll to ruin one of the marriages by seducing a husband and having him cheat on his wife or husband. I told him no, in which he informed me that he was just going to ignore what I said and use Charm Person anyway. So I reiterated that I believe no is a full sentence, and I said no. Now, I do not mind him charming people or flirting with people, but I do not like people trying to ruin the marriages of NPCs, and the other players agreed with me. So we moved on. They got in the carts of the caravan, and they started going down the road. I did the thing, and the entire caravan that has never been attacked by bandits before got attacked by bandits, and everyone got knocked out with a smoke-like fog and kidnapped. They all woke up in cages, and a bunch of stuff happened. The Bard asked if he could roll to charm one of the guards, and I said sure, because Charm Person does give me the opportunity to roll for the guards. I rolled for the guards, and he didn't beat their rolls, so he got petty and decided that he was going to try and cast blindness and deafness on them, and it only succeeded in working partially on one guard. And his entire reason for doing this is because he wasn't able to successfully seduce the guard. He also proceeded to complain about not being able to seduce the guard, and when I asked him to please not make a habit of doing that whenever he fails seducing someone, he told me that the next time he feels seducing someone, he's just going to use Thunderclap on them. My other players groaned in annoyance at this. I just sighed, and we proceeded with the campaign until we decided to stop for that session. But honestly, if he's going to make it a habit of trying to blind, deafen, or do serious damage to people if he cannot succeed on seducing them, I don't know what I'm going to do. Update. First off, I would just like to thank everyone for being so kind and open to the situation, and for giving some really good advice. I forgot to mention when I first posted this, but me and my players decided when we started that we will play twice a week. I have spoke with him about his behavior, and when we first started talking, he denied what he did and said that he only tried to get the guard's attention. However, after I reminded him that I have a voice recorder active during our sessions, so I can remember what the players do if I wasn't able to take down notes at the moment, and the voice recorder is something all of my players are aware of and that they all said that they're okay with beforehand. If they would have said otherwise, then I wouldn't have used it. He then admitted to what he did to the guard, but claimed that he didn't remember doing anything to the caravan. At that point, I just played the recording on my tablet for him. His exact response was, "Oh yeah, that. Well, it wasn't hurting anything, and I did stop after you said no as a full sentence." Which he did, but only after he said that. We talked for a bit longer, and I told him that he wasn't playing a bard, he was playing a trope, and that there is nothing wrong with that, but if you play into a trope too much, it can hurt you and the others, as well as hinder the campaign. I also told him that I will not tolerate it if he plans to make a habit of what happened with the guard. And he said, "I won't, don't worry." Except I am worried, because it didn't feel like he was taking me seriously. Also, he already said before this conversation that he was going to make a habit of it, but I am willing to let him play tonight and see how it goes. If he did listen to me and things go well, then that's great. If not, then he can either roll a new character that's not a bard, or just leave my table. Well, it certainly sounded like Bard wanted to play into the standard bard stereotype, but I can understand OP not wanting him to do that on the caravan. I mean, maybe let him try it on one of the NPCs, but have it as a high DC, and even if they pass, have the NPC be flattered but still say no. But for Bard to then flat out say that he will become a murder hobo if his charming skills aren't successful is just being petty. Though in this instance, OP did the right thing and talked to him out of game about his behavior, so hopefully Bard listened to OP and the game goes on without a hitch. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.